Well, here's something that you didn't know. 2 of those special atomic bombs haven't gone off.
Welcome everyone to the Holistic Hipster channel. I am your host, ALEXIS Rivera. And in today's video, I will be sharing with you how to correct an anterior pelvic tilt. And before I actually share with you these exercises on how to go about correcting that, let me share with you a few of my credentials of why I feel I am credible enough to share with you these exercises. To begin, I am a certified FRC movement specialist, and I am also a certified stick mobility movement specialist. And in today's video, I'm going to take a few of those exercises and concepts that I've learned from both those certifications, and I'm also going to pair that with a few of the teachings from the MAPS corrective exercise programs, specifically taking cues from MAPS Prime and MAPS Prime Pro. Anyway, let's get into it. So if you clicked on this video, chances are you have an anterior pelvic tilt and you're looking at how to correct it. And first off, with most muscular deviations, it's going to take time for it to go away. This isn't something that just occurs overnight and likewise cannot be corrected overnight. Because when it comes to correcting most of these poor recruitment patterns, your ability to correct it will be completely dependent on how frequently you do these exercises. Now, before we go into the exercises, we must first assess if we have an anterior pelvic tilt. To do so, you're going to be using the Zone 3 squat test from MAPS Prime. And to begin, we're going to hold the stick behind our back with one hand behind our neck and the other hand on our lower back. From there, we're going to place our feet in a parallel stance. Now, you're going to create 3 points of contact with the stick, and those 3 points are going to be the back of your head, your back, as well as your glutes. Your goal is to drop down into a squat while maintaining flat feet and those 3 points of contact with the stick. If you can do this on both sides, then it's a pass. But if there are any signs of deviation or if you cannot perform the test, then it's a fail. But if you notice that your back loses contact with the stick and your lower back starts to arch excessively, then you test positive for an anterior pelvic tilt. Real quick, let me give a quick rundown of what an anterior pelvic tilt is. Now, this is where there's an excessive curvature or hyperextension of the lower back. And if you have an anterior pelvic tilt, it means you have tight or overactive hip flexors as well as weakened glutes and abs. So to correct this, we're going to have to tell your hips to relax and we're going to have to strengthen your glutes and your abs. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to stretch out your hip flexors, and we'll be doing so using a mobility stick from Stick Mobility. And to begin with this stretch, you're going to want to step into a half kneeling stance and extend both your arms fully in front of you while placing the bottom of the stick perpendicular with your toes. Next, you're going to want to tilt your pelvis forward and flex the glute of the leg that is behind you. And once that glute is working, you want to maintain that activation as you drive the stick into the floor while simultaneously driving your knee over your toes. And if you're doing this correctly, you're going to notice a gnarly and intense stretch in your hip flexors. Also, if you want to intensify the stretch, you may most certainly do so by applying a slight rotation of the stick towards the direction of the leg that is in front of you. Okay, so now that the hips are deactivated, we can now work by sending a signal to activate the glutes. And to do so, we're going to be performing pelvic tilts into a hip bridge. Now, doing bridges by themselves when an anterior pelvic tilt is present will not create a proper signal for glute activation. Because if your back is arched when performing a bridge, your back will take the stress of the movement. So instead, what we want to do is we want to tilt the pelvis forward so that you are no longer in that hyperextended position. And to do this, you're going to want to lie down on a mat. The first thing we're going to do is tilt that pelvis forward. At first, this may be a hard thing to do because we're teaching a new movement pattern, so try this. Naturally, there's going to be a gap between your lower back and the floor. Your goal is to eliminate that gap by pressing your lower back flush against the floor. From there, you're going to want to tighten your abs as you drive your hips forward towards the ceiling. And if you're doing this correctly, you should notice your glutes flexing at the top of each rep. If so, hold that isometric contraction for a solid 2 to 3 seconds just to solidify that activation signal. I recommend doing 2 sets of 10 reps on these. And as you can see now, I am doing a different variation of the bridge. These are called frog bridges, and when doing this, you'll notice a slightly different area of activation on the glute. When doing these, very similar setup when doing the pelvic tilts. You want a pelvic tilt, and then elevate your hips, and then flex the glutes at the top of the set. Perform 1 to 2 sets of 10 total reps, just to get that proper glute activation signal. And here's another exercise to strengthen your glutes that includes the application of movement. This right here is the reverse lunge toe touch. And for this, you're going to do one side at a time as you take a long, exaggerated stride behind you and as you touch the top of your foot. The goal is to put the glute in a stretched position so you can train the glute in a larger range of motion. For this, perform a total of 10 reps on each side. And right here is a bonus glute exercise, which is a progression to the reverse lunge toe touch. Now, this is slightly more advanced, but it is a fantastic way to repattern a hip hinge through the assistance of a mobility stick. Now, to do this, you're going to want to create tension by driving the stick into your foot and driving your foot into the stick. And from there, you're going to hinge from the hip until your upper body is parallel with the floor. If you have the motor control to do this, perform 5 to 10 reps on each side with good overall control. Okay, and now it's time for some ab exercises that properly work your abs. All too often, it's actually the hip flexors that take over during ab exercises. So the first prerequisite movement will be a basic isometric prone plank on the knees. And to get into this, you're going to want to drop down into a plank from the knees, and also you're going to want to tilt your pelvis forward, very similar to what we did with the pelvic tilts to the hip bridge. And once your pelvis is tilted, you're going to want to crunch and contract your abs while simultaneously flexing your glutes. Also, you're going to want to hold this for time until you notice that your form is starting to break, or until you notice that your pelvis is no longer tilted forward. Now, once you've gotten down the plank, you can then progress and perform a ball crunch. To do this, you're going to want to place your lower back on a ball and then place your hands behind your head. From there, tilt your pelvis forward and flex your glutes. Also, keep your glutes in that tilted position during the entire time of this exercise. And if you don't do that, your already dominant hip flexors will start to take over the movement. Next, tighten your abs as you then begin to perform a crunch. I recommend doing 10 to 20 reps on these. It's also worth mentioning that if you have an anterior pelvic tilt, the last ab exercise that you should be doing are leg raises or hanging leg raises. Now, when done incorrectly, your hip flexors will start to take over, or you may start to experience lower back pain. This is something I see all too often and is only causing more harm than good. Now, just to illustrate my point, you can see what a leg raise would look like when an anterior pelvic tilt is actually present. Anyway guys, hopefully you found this video useful. If you did, please like the video, and also please subscribe to the channel for more content just like this. Also, if you happen to know someone who has an anterior pelvic tilt, please send them this video and I guarantee they will thank you greatly for it. Now, if you're looking at purchasing a stick of your own just like the one available in the video, just click the link in the description down below and you will be redirected to Stick Mobility's website. Also, if you're looking at learning a little bit more about corrective exercise, then check out the MAPS Prime and Prime Pro programs. I actually have a link down below that will take you right to their website, and you can use the discount code HOLISTICHIPSTER to receive 10% off any of the MAPS programs. Also, any questions about today's video? Any questions about an anterior pelvic tilt? Any questions at all regarding corrective exercise, just leave a comment down below and I would be more than happy to answer them. Anyway guys, thanks for watching. I'll see you all later.